channel. So today I want to do a video on some of the best modifications for a 6 Gen Camaro, the 2016 to 2022. And now a lot of channels, when they do videos on these cars, they don't take in consideration warranty. A lot of these cars are fairly new and they got a warranty on them, and you really, in my opinion, you don't want to void your warranty. So the first few modifications will be for people who don't want to void their warranty, and for those that are in areas that are very strict emission laws. So the first modification is the driver modification. To get the most out of these cars, it takes a lot of practice because they make a lot of power, a lot of low-end torque. So traction is a real problem. So, like I said, the first modification is just practice with the car. You want to get the most out of what you got without doing any modifications. And especially if you got a manual, because even the automatic takes some practice to learn to get it right on the edge of losing traction. But the manual's even harder, so it takes a lot of practice. So that'd be the first modification you want to do. And then the second modification that won't affect your warranty or your emissions is a set of drag radials. Drag radials really help launch the car, and with a set of drag radials and lots of practice, you can probably, depending on where you live, what kind of elevation you're at, you probably get in the high 11s with just a set of drag radials. And now, like I said, if you're worried about your warranty or you have strict emission laws, the next thing you could do is just buy a whole drag pack. That's an extra set of wheels with drag radials for the back and a set of skinnies on the front. That lowers the weight, and it helps a lot in your quarter-mile time. And then after that, just basic bolt-ons, same as every other car. Cold air intake. But before you put the cold air intake on, you want to check with your dealer to make sure it won't void your warranty. It shouldn't, but it's best to always check. And most of them are emissions legal, so you won't have any issues there. So a cold air intake. Now, me personally, I prefer a closed box, but I know a lot of the guys, they like the open box. I don't know if it's because it looks better or not, but for me personally, I would prefer a closed box. And you don't really need any tuning for a cold air intake as long as the intake tube that the mass air meter goes in is the same diameter as the stock one, which I think most of them are. One of the cold air intakes that I like, but that does require tuning, is the Rotofab Big Gulp. Now, it's an open box. It would be the only one that I would consider. It would be the only open box intake that I would consider is the Big Gulp. But like I say, it does require some tuning. Now, for exhaust, if you got the dual mode exhaust, in my opinion, you don't need anything else. But some guys don't really care for the sound of it. So in that case, you could upgrade your exhaust, and that shouldn't affect the warranty. But again, you might want to check with your dealer, and it won't. And most of them are emissions legal because they're a catback system. Now, the next modification that I would do, depending on how you're making out with traction, is some suspension work. Now, this shouldn't void your warranty, but again, you want to check with your dealer before you start doing any work to the suspension. But you can get trailing arms and control arms for the rear end to help with traction. And chances are, after you get a few modifications, you probably will start having traction issues. With the manual, you probably have traction issues right from the start. Yeah, suspension work is what I do next. You want to be able to put all that power to the ground. That's the key. And that won't affect emissions at all, so you'll still be fine on the emissions end of it. And I don't think it should bother the warranty, but again, like I said, you might want to check. Then after that, if you got an automatic, I would get a torque converter. Now this almost certainly will avoid your warranty, but it won't, as far as emissions goes, you'll be fine. So, and when it comes to these cars, I would only get the name brands like Yank or Circle D. I think FTI is starting to build a pretty good reputation. But if you're buying a torque converter for one of these cars, you want to actually call the company that you plan on buying from and talk to them, and they'll set you up with the best converter for your car. Okay, so now we're gonna start doing some modifications that definitely will affect your warranty. Exhaust, like ahead of the cats, and if you, like I say, if you're in an emissions strict state, you're probably better off not bothering your exhaust. But for those who don't care about the warranty, or the warranty's run out and you don't have to worry about emissions, a set of long tube headers is the way to go. Now, in my opinion, Speed Engineering is the best, just because quality versus price. All their stuff's made out of stainless steel, and the prices are probably about as low as you're going to find. So I would stick with the dual mode exhaust and buy the Speed Engineering 1 7/8 inch headers. Now they also sell a 2-inch header, but to me it's not worth getting the 2-inch one, just because you'll have some clearance issues. And far as more power goes, unless you're building something really high end, the 2-inch isn't going to gain you much, if anything, over the 1 7/8 inch headers. So I would stick with the 1 7/8 inch headers. We installed them on the Stuntman's car, and they went on quite easy. It's actually a good system. To me, it sounds good, but some people might not. It is very loud, I will say that. But if you put a set of cats on, that would probably help quiet it down some. Now, one other thing I left out was tuning. You can gain some power on tuning on these cars, but you got to have somebody who knows what they're doing. So it's not going to be cheap. Now you can get by with cold air intake, as long as the intake tube is the same diameter as the stock one, like I said. And you can get by without tuning with suspension work and the catback exhaust. But once you move on to the headers, you don't necessarily really need tuning, but you got to have some tuning, because it'll set a check engine light when you remove the cats and stuff. And also keep in mind that a tune can void your warranty, so you got to be careful there. And it don't matter if you take the tune out or not, they'll know if it's been tuned or not. It really comes down to how strict your dealership is. Some wouldn't pay attention to whether it had been tuned or not. Some will. And anyway, after you do all the bolt-ons, then of course the next thing is cam. There's lots of different cams you can pick from. Doing a cam swap on a 6th gen is a little bit more difficult, so I'm not even going to get into that. We're more of a budget channel. Now the Stuntman wants to put a camshaft in next summer. I'm probably going to try to talk him out of it and just go with suspension work, because he's got a torque converter in his car and he's not able to get traction. So he's usually somewhere between 20 and 30 miles an hour before he actually reaches full throttle. So I'm going to see if we can do some more suspension work, try to hook that up, because there's a lot in the car just by getting traction. Anyway, guys, I'm just going to keep this video quite basic. I'm not getting into ported cylinder heads and camshafts. But when you're doing the cylinder heads and camshafts, unless you've got a lot of experience taking these motors apart, you're probably better off going to a shop that's got some experience. There is one thing I left out, is intake manifold. We put a LS or an LT2 intake on the stuntman's car, and that seemed to improve the car, and it was fairly cheap. It's actually a good modification to make. It was easy to install. We didn't do any tuning. It still worked fine, and we did notice an improvement in the performance. Anyway, guys, that's it. Like I said, I just wanted to get into the basics. I didn't want to get into the... We're not going to talk about superchargers and turbos or stroker motors. And I'm kind of steering away from the cam and heads as well, just because, like I said, it's not for your basic do-it-yourselfer. They're a little more complicated. Now, I put the camshaft in my LS1 Camaro, but it's quite simple on an LS1, but on the LT1, it's a little more complicated, so we won't get into that. Like I said, this is more or less a budget channel. If you're watching this channel, you're probably just looking to do basic bolt-ons. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.